Hello and welcome to Lutherans Alive. My name is Gregory Held, and this is the program that brings you the story of Lutheran Christians and their ministries in southwestern Pennsylvania. With us today is Natalie Gessert. Natalie's newly ordained pastor at Oak Grove Lutheran Church near Zeunople. Natalie, welcome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for taking the time to come in and spend with us today. Let's start just by giving folks a little bit of background, maybe where you were born and raised, and maybe what the original family looked like.
I was born in Minot, North Dakota, and I lived there for a grand total of 11 days before I crawled out of town. I am the first child of my parents, and we ended up living in quite a number of places. Omaha, Nebraska for a number of years, Ypsilanti, Michigan, where my father's from, Fairfax, Virginia. We lived outside of Frankfurt in Germany in a small town called Merfelden. And ever since, I've also lived, certainly at college, but I've also done work in Bratislava and Martin, Slovakia, and in Russia. So.
I hope that means that the authorities weren't after your father.
No, my father was part of the authorities. My father was a career Air Force, and now he works private sector intelligence, and he and my mother both live in Fairfax, Virginia, at the home that we moved into when I was in kindergarten and retained while we moved overseas a number of times.
Okay, very good.
So, and I have two younger brothers, Derek and Jonathan. And Derek is a mechanical engineer. He graduated from Michigan State University, and now he's working as a mechanical engineer for the civilian Navy. And my youngest brother, Jonathan, he's just a sophomore in college. He is at Bridgewater College.
Was church a part of your life as a young person growing up, even with all that moving around?
It was. Again, it was a little out of the norm. My mother was raised in a conservative to Orthodox Jewish family, and she married my father, and no one in the family would show up for the wedding because she was marrying a Christian. But then later on in life, 6 years into their marriage, my parents became pregnant with me, and they decided that it might be better to raise their child in a single faith home. And so when Mom was 5 months pregnant, she was baptized by an Estonian Lutheran pastor.
Is that right?
Mm-hmm. And so it started our journey in faith. I think we were a pretty normal family. We would go to church sometimes, and I did participate in things like Sunday school. We went to an Episcopal church, actually, a British Episcopal church when we were living overseas.
I see.
But I will say it was a shock to my parents when I mentioned seminary to them.
When was it that you first had thoughts that the church vocation might actually be in your future?
My senior year in college, when two professors, actually, I was at Roanoke College in Salem, Virginia. I was very, very excited by the sciences and was hoping to go to medical school. But I had two professors there at the school, Professors Paul Hinlicky and Bob Benny, and they thought that it might be interesting for me to check out seminary.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm so glad that they suggested it. I still think about medical school, but at the same time, I'm very happy in this field. And so they suggested it. I wasn't sure. I'd never thought about where pastors came from. Maybe the stork brought them. Who knows? But it was the right choice, and I'm so glad they pulled me aside so that I would think about that.
Mm-hmm.
So I immediately started seminary right after college.
And what was it as you really began to think about and reflect upon your faith, and what ministry was about that clicked?
Certainly it had to do with those professors at college. Intelligence, academia, just being able to know things and know your world is really important to me. And that came to be important to me because of these figures that taught me. And I thought that if these people could be so intelligent and so aware, and they're pastors too, gosh, maybe I could be very aware of what's going on in the world. And that was very encouraging to me. And as I've continued to go through seminary even, it's just been remarkable to think about how not only are these professors very aware of the world, but they teach me how to be involved in the world in really remarkable ways as a faithful person. I don't need to withdraw as a super holy spiritualist. Mm-hmm. I can be part of this world, and I can listen to music and watch television shows I like and see movies and find ways to use those as points of connection, which is actually, it resembles what I saw my father doing. in his work. We worked with people in the former Eastern Bloc. I was constantly exposed to Russians and Belarusians and Ukrainians and just the whole corridor. We moved to Germany just before the Berlin Wall fell. And it was just such a remarkable thing to see my father working with primarily arms control treaties. And the way that he would help broker those wasn't with power plays and power moves. It was by inviting these folks over to our home for supper.
Interesting.
And so I remember my mom asking me to play the piano, or my brothers and I having a game of chess with these big bad Russian soldiers. But in reality, that's what builds bridges and makes deals such as arms control treaties or even faith just real.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it, that for many the perception of religion or faith is that it's separate from the world. It's a private, personal thing. And a lot of people don't see that it has a relevance or a connection. But as you say, for a person with a deep faith, it can connect to everything.
And it means that it matters what I do in my day-to-day life. And I want to invite people in my congregation or people in my community, my friends, my family. I want them to be part of my eating, my home life. I want them to know that God is a significant part of who I am in my kitchen as much as it is in my pulpit. And it helps teach other people how to be public about their faith and their life as well.
So as you began to think about seminary and pursuing that vocation, having been a lot of different places, was it difficult to settle on or decide about a seminary?
Not really, because I had no preconceived notions at all. Those professors suggested 3 non-Lutheran seminaries. They suggested some divinity schools, and they suggested Luther Seminary. It was the only seminary of the Lutheran ilk that they suggested. I applied there, and I'm actually so glad I did. It wasn't, like I saw in so many of my classmates, a matter of sort of a familial connection. I went to school with a lot of Norwegian folks. Everyone had the last name Berggren Dollarson. They were many natural blondes. A lot of people who graduated from St. Olaf or from Concordia in Moorhead, Minnesota. But, and of course, I'm not like that. I'm half Jewish. My last name is Gessert. It means goat herder in German. But what is so helpful about having been taught in that environment is not only did I get a good education, as I would in many of our Lutheran seminaries, it also gave me a good cultural education. Because part of Lutheranism is understanding how we behave culturally. And it was more culture shock than I had ever gotten anywhere else from even moving overseas. It was remarkable, but I'm so thankful for that experience.
I think Lutherans may underestimate how enculturated they are, but from time to time when the covers get pulled off a little bit, it's there. There's no question about it. We are at the point where we do need to take our first break of today's program, though, so we're going to pause for just a moment and come back and maybe talk about what some of the most exciting and penetrating thoughts and experiences at seminary were. We'll be right back.